Alright guys, welcome to Charbie Talks. Today we will be talking about the Crash N.Sane Trilogy, which is coming out in 2 days, as of when I'm recording this, probably tomorrow by the time this gets posted. But, as many of you know, I am a big Crash fan, as I'm sure a lot of people who grew up on the PlayStation, they probably all had Crash games as well, so it's a game that's, or at least a trilogy I should say, that's pretty close to a lot of us. Crash Bandicoot 2 was my very first video game ever. So naturally, I'm pretty nostalgic when I hear that they're redoing the first 3 games, so I wanted to chat about it for a bit. Today we're going to talk about basically some overall points of the trilogy coming out, kind of expectations, things I'm hoping that they don't mess up, things I'm hoping that they fix to not keep it completely negative kind of thing, as well as break down a little bit of Crash 1, 2, and 3 and kind of just some things that I'm going to be kind of keeping my eye out for, so I should start with the notion that I am pumped for it. Again, like I said, the nostalgia is strong with this game. When they announced it, I was pretty pumped. Now that it's about to come out, I'm actually super pumped. There was a point in time where I wasn't so pumped, and we'll talk about that in a couple seconds, but I am definitely really looking forward to this. I've got it on pre-order, and I don't pre-order a whole lot of stuff anymore. I find usually like a month later I can get games at like half off, and just a personal thing, but I've got such a backlog of games right now that I don't need to pre-order anyways. The last game I pre-ordered was Resident Evil 7, and I literally just beat it the other night in, June, when it came out in January, so I don't do it much, but I pre-ordered this game. So I'm looking forward to it. So we'll just get right into it of kind of the overall thing. One of the biggest things I think is going to help improve the game and help make the remake of the trilogy a success is the fact that they're adding time trials for Crash 1 and Crash 2. The reason for this, first of all, we all know time trials are pretty fun. They add a level of additional competitiveness, additional difficulty, if you want to call it that, because you do need more strategy rather than just kind of stumbling your way to the end of the level. So the reason that it's such a major point, why I wanted to lead off with this, is it's going to be a huge improvement for Crash 1 and Crash 2, because in Crash 1 and Crash 2, once you got the gems, assuming you already got the crystal, once you got the gems, you never had a reason to go back to that level, ever again. And some of those levels are very, very good levels that you just, you kind of have to have your own reason for going back, or if you just want to replay it, you go and replay it, but the time trials will actually give you not only a reason, but a challenge to go back to. The other reason I think that the time trials are so important is because it actually shows a little bit of, I don't know if initiative is the right word, but we're going to go with that here, on the part of the development team to not just make a graphically superior carbon copy of the games. They're actually going in, because time trials, as many of you know, are not just a simple add a clock at the beginning of the level and see how fast you beat it, right? You've got to include all the little time boxes and everything too. You've got to kind of have an idea of target times, what you want to aim for. You've got to set different tiers of target times for the different, Sapphire, Gold, and Platinum. I'm assuming they're still going with this. I'm going to actually make a side note right here. I haven't really played anything past the Wrath of Cortex, aside from the couple Game Boy Advance games they had. So I'm kind of going off the notion, assuming that the series is still kind of like that, and even if it isn't, I'm then going to go off the notion of they're probably going to keep it the way it used to be, so we're going to go with Sapphire, Gold, and Platinum for all intents and purposes. So that's the thing that I'm most looking forward to with this game, is just having a reason to go back and play some of the better levels. Crash 2 is my favorite of the 3. I don't know how you guys feel about them, but there's definitely quite a few levels, like all the snow levels, all the creek levels, like Hang 8 and that. Actually, pretty much everything that wasn't Digging It and Bee Haven in Crash 2 was pretty much my favorite level. Let's just put it like that. So I'll be looking forward to kind of going through, and like I said, it gives you that added challenge and that new challenge, right? It's something that anybody who's experienced with those games, I literally just finished playing Crash 2 again in preparation of it coming out. So obviously there's no time trial there, right? I am going to be able to, or it's going to be something completely new for me to go and try. And, you know, I'm probably, as good as I am at the game, I may very well not make it, you know, platinums across the board the first try for everything. So I'm looking forward to that and kind of having to devise more strategies rather than just, you know, surviving until the end kind of thing. So that's kind of the big thing for me. I know the other kind of awesome thing is the graphics update that a lot of people are looking at, but I don't know. Like, as you can see in the footage that's playing, it's not terrible graphics wise. Obviously, it's not the best. And my PS3 is doing a phenomenal job of upscaling to 720, which is what we're in right now. But, you know, I'm more excited for the new stuff than I am the simple graphics update because there are games. The other two series that I'm kind of big on my channel at least are Final Fantasy and Resident Evil, and those are games that very much require graphical updates, especially from their PlayStation stuff. You know, with Resident Evil 2 Remake coming out soon and hopefully 7 coming out sometime in the next 10 years, shot at Square Enix for that. You know, those are going to be huge graphical updates, whereas with Crash, because it wasn't meant to be a realistic style of game, it didn't quite need it as much. Obviously, it's welcome. It's very much welcome. I'm not debating that, but in terms of need, I'm much more looking forward to the new stuff. I'm looking forward to the trophy stuff, which I'll get to in a second. So the graphics update is a plus, and hopefully, and Crash 1 comes to mind for a lot of this, but hopefully some levels will, I guess the word I want to use is flow a bit better with the graphical updates. I've seen some updates of some of the temple levels. I think there was another one. You know, like the fact that they're redoing it all will make it a little bit easier to distinguish certain things, and you know, Sunset Vista and actually the temple levels as well, and the Road to Nowhere and probably Slippery Climb are the four that I'm most looking forward to with regards to the graphical updates. The other little thing is that it looks like the camera's going to be a bit further back. I know on the PlayStation, for rendering purposes, they had it pretty close to the character, so you couldn't see a whole lot in front of you, so hopefully that kind of changes things a bit too. I don't want to say makes it easier, but making things more identifiable in the environment is always a positive, so we'll go with that. So that's kind of the plus of the graphics update. And as I just mentioned, the trophies, I'm a bit of a trophy hunter. I'm not like, you know, oh my god, I have to platinum everything. But I do enjoy the challenge of getting some of the trophies in a game, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. If each game is going to have its own kind of individual set, or if it's all kind of just going to be one set of like 51 for the entire trilogy. I kind of imagine they're going to go with that, because 3 different platinums for each of the games might be a little too much. But we'll see what they do. I realize people have actually already looked up the trophy, like the trophy lists, and I don't really care enough. Like, I can wait the extra day and a bit and actually start playing and seeing what I'm unlocking, so. But that'll be fun for me. I know not everybody's into trophies, so that may be a very moot point for some people, but for me it's a big thing, so. And all in all, it looks like it's a solid flow of gameplay. I've seen some, I haven't watched every trailer, but I've seen most of them. And especially with the Crash 3 ones, I noticed it just seemed to kind of all go together a little better. The futuristic levels there with the, I want to say it's Gone Tomorrow, was the level with the little target guy that shoots the missiles at you. That just seemed a little more put together, and you know, the movement seemed a little bit better, so I'm looking forward to that. So, oh, and I should probably also mention, I'm curious, I don't know if I'm looking forward to it or not, but I'm certainly curious about the Coco gameplay that they've got going on. I saw the Coco trailer? I don't know. I don't really even know what you call them anymore, but they showed off a little bit of gameplay. So I think it's pretty cool that you can switch back and forth between the characters, and it's across all 3 games. I'm curious if she can fight bosses or if that's a specific thing, and I'm curious when you get to Crash 3, I know there are some levels that are kind of Coco only, if those are still going to be the same, if Crash will have some Crash only levels, to kind of make up for the fact that there are some Coco only levels. Because she did the, I mean, you could very well, outside of maybe the Pura and Polar, like the bear and the um, tiger there, outside of those, I could kind of see you swapping one for the other, pretty much in any other thing, like the jet skis, the, well, you know what, Crash might get like the swimming levels, which are kind of lame anyways, and then maybe Coco gets the jet ski levels, and maybe there's a trade-off. I don't know, I'm pretty interested to see how that works. The one thing I noticed about, and maybe it was just the gameplay that I saw, but it didn't look like Coco had a slide option. So I'm curious if her jump's a little bit better, if levels are redone ever so slightly to adjust for that, how that would go about working. Because the slide jump is a pretty important mechanic, especially later on in the game for Crash 2. I think it was one of the earlier, like the snow levels. It might have even been Snow Go for the footage that I saw. I'm not too sure, but it didn't seem like she had a slide jump or a crawl or anything, so it could, like I said, it could just be the footage that I saw, but that was definitely something that caught my eye. So I'm curious to see how that would affect gameplay. If there are certain levels that you need Crash for, if they're nice enough to tell you before you enter the level that you need Crash. Little things here and there about that, So, the couple things that I was a little bit concerned about, and concern might be a bad word because I'm not really going into this with a negative mindset, but I am hoping, at the very least, that the controls for, well, actually, I guess just the controls in general are a little bit tighter. I know, again, after just playing Crash 2, and granted it was the first Crash game to incorporate the analog sticks, if you so chose, they were kind of meant for the direction keys, so now that the direction keys are almost never really used in games, unless it's like to switch an item or something like that. I'm curious if the controls will be a little bit tighter, especially I think of the animal levels, like the Polar Pura. I don't know if the hog actually has a proper name or not, so we're just going to call him the hog. But those levels can get a little rough here and there, especially with the speed that the animal's going. Trying to get from one side to the other, sometimes you just barely miss like the corner of a box, so I'm curious if that's going to be a little bit tighter and a little bit more responsive with the analog stick. I'm hoping so. You know, it's kind of one of the few things that they really needed to correct, and I'm using air quotes when I say that. But, yeah. And then the other thing I'm curious about is whether the box and enemy placements will be in the exact same areas that we're familiar with, or if they're going to switch things up. I can't really speak to Crash 1 because I don't have that game memorized nearly as well as I do Crash 2, but I can pretty much tell you where every weird box is in Crash 2. It's very rare that I miss boxes. Ironically enough, I missed a couple boxes in like the first warp room of the first video of the Crash 2 footage that I'm posting, like right after this. But for the most part, I can pretty much tell you where all the weird stuff is and what to, you know, where you got to veer off a certain path and whatnot. Again, less so for Crash 1, but these things happen. So, but I am curious if, especially with the enemy placements and the enemy types, I realize I probably shouldn't expect new enemies to show up with regards to this, but at the same time, I am somewhat curious if they're at least going to switch things around, add more, move them around. Like I said earlier, right, one of the things that I was pretty happy about with regards to the time trials was the fact that it wasn't going to be a straight up copy paste kind of thing. So in the same sense, I'm kind of hoping that the box's enemy placements, you know, stuff like that, I'm assuming that the secret pathways and all that stuff is going to be the same, but who knows, they may move that as well. Yeah, obviously I'm referencing Crash 2 a lot when I say that, but again, I'm just, you know, I get it if they don't change it, but I would like something of a change, even if it's just enemies, if they leave all the boxes and the box amounts the same. So, but again, right, a lot of us probably have this game pretty down pat, so any kind of variation to make it more interesting for us the second time around in terms of this new trilogy, the better. So that's kind of my one point with that. I wouldn't be upset if it wasn't changed, but I would definitely be pretty excited if it was. You know, if I jump into that first level and, well, maybe not the first level, but like the second level, and all of a sudden there's a few boxes that are in different places, or all of a sudden, you know, if I'm going down a level and I know exactly how many boxes are supposed to be at the end, and I look at the counter at the top of the screen and it says a completely different number, like 25 more, I'd be like, oh, awesome, we got to go searching for stuff now, right? So, yeah, that's about that. That's pretty much all I had to say that was kind of across the board for all the games, so I'll kind of just break it down a bit more. Crash 1 seems to have the most. I've got a few jot notes in front of me in case you guys were wondering. I don't write entire scripts, but I got a few pointers that I want to make sure I touch on, so Crash 1 seems to have the most. I'm curious if the moveset's going to be improved in Crash, if it's just going to be jump and spin, if they are going to incorporate a slide. Again, the slide with the jump kind of changes dynamics quite a bit, so I don't know if they would be incorporating that, because you'd probably want to also incorporate a usage for that later on. So, you know, again, I wouldn't be disappointed if they didn't, but I would definitely be excited if they did. So, that's kind of the only downside. I'm curious, and this is strictly curiosity, and I have no idea kind of how to interpret it, but I'm curious how the bonuses are going to work. Because in the first game, you had the Tana bonuses, which were... Tana? Yeah, Tana. Or maybe it was Tanya. No, I think it was just Tanya. Anyways, her stuff was where you saved, which I assume is not going to be the same way you save. It may very well be an autosave, actually. That's one of the few things I actually didn't bother looking into before I started this video, so maybe I should have done that. But I'm curious about that. The Brio bonus levels were kind of pointless. They were difficult and pointless. And the Cortex ones obviously gave you keys, which is another thing actually I'm curious if they're doing any of those kind of bonuses. If they're going to go to the style of bonus rounds that they had for Crash 2 and 3, which is the actual designated area. I'm also then curious if they're going to include the boxes in the total count at the end. Crash 1 was the only game not to include anything in the bonus round was strictly bonus, basically. You know, you could avoid all the boxes and it wouldn't matter with your total end count. So, I'm curious about that. I'm also curious if they're going to have the stipulation where you have to beat the level beginning to end without dying. Because most of the challenge from that game was quite literally making it from beginning to end. There were a lot of levels that were easy-ish, and once you kind of memorize some levels, they were good, and then there were some levels that just things could go wonky very fast. Slippery Climb and Sunset Vista are two that come to mind for me personally. I seem to always struggle with those, and Fumbling in the Dark. Well, excuse me. Those three were usually pretty big problems for me. And Native Fortress, actually, now that I'm thinking back on when I did my recording. That one gave me a pretty hellish time as well, so. Given games today and how much hand-holding there is, I kind of suspect that they will take that out. Especially to make the checkpoints more effective. Obviously, this is a very nostalgia-based game, but they are going to want to pull in new people who may have started on the PlayStation 2. They may have even started on the PlayStation 3. Maybe, the most recent games, I actually couldn't even tell you what the most recent games are. But maybe those are the ones that they're interested in, and this is going to be an entirely new experience for them. That would make things pretty difficult, going beginning to end just to get the gem. So I do suspect they'll be taking that out, but I could be wrong. Again, one of those things, that entire little section there is just some stuff that I never really looked into before I started this video, and given that the game's coming out in 2 days, I'm not particularly concerned with going out and finding out and correcting myself now. I'll find out pretty quick once I get the game and I do the first level, and maybe I'll actually die on purpose just to see if when we get to the end, if I get the gem still or not. So, because the first level, like Insanity Beach, it's stupid easy. I could go back and do it in like a minute and a half or something stupid like that. But actually, speaking of time, and speaking of the fact that we talked about time trials, I'm also curious about whether or not they're going to include power-ups or not. Because with the time trials, you could very well have power-ups. At the very least, I feel like they might be including, or they could include, I shouldn't say might be, I should say could include the Crash Dash, which is the like super sprint. Once you beat Cortex at the end, if that was the only power-up for Crash 1 and Crash 2, because that's going to be, there's, assuming they keep the same controller layout, and at this point I have no reason to believe they won't, that button is not assigned in either game, R2, so realistically they could add that function once you beat the game, and I'm using air quotes here, once you beat the final boss. You know, you've cleared the warp rooms, you've cleared the island, so to speak, and you're going back to get the rest of the gems, and going back to get the rest of the relics, they may award you with that at the end. Even if they don't do, you know, double jump, super spin, all that stuff. Because much in the same way as I was curious if they're even adding the slide function, a lot of that stuff is going to add more dynamic to the game. So realistically, you would want to add areas that you could use that stuff in. So I'm of the belief that you're probably not getting power-ups in Crash 1 or 2. But again, I'm curious how they're going to handle Crash Dash, because Crash Dash does make quite a difference in the time trials. And if you don't have that speed up, obviously the times are going to be adjusted, but you're also going to have to adjust your strategy a bit more, right? And usually, and at least for me, I know going a bit faster when you're doing these time trials, you tend to make a couple more sloppy mistakes here and there because of the extra speed. So again, one of those things I'm curious about. I'll find out pretty quick, obviously, and as will most of us when the game comes out, but it's one of those things I was thinking about, and that kind of carries over to Crash 2 as well. So, yeah. Crash 2. Oh, one last point on Crash 1, actually. I'm curious about the extra levels. And by extra levels, I mean, when Naughty Dog initially did this game, there were some, I think they're commonly referred to as the lost levels. And again, I'm using air quotes there. But I know there were 2 for sure, if my memory is not mistaken, that were actually completely done, just not included in the game. One was a style of level similar to Slippery Climb. You know what, I'm blanking on the name. I probably should have looked these 2 up beforehand, and there was another one that was an extremely difficult, I don't know if it was an extremely difficult version of Sunset Vista or an extension of Sunset Vista. I've heard different things. I've never played either of these kind of prototype levels, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. I've just seen a few plays on YouTube, but nonetheless, I'm curious about if they're going to include that. I saw a video yesterday, actually. I have no idea who they were. I was looking up some Crash stuff and it popped up in the recommended feed, so, but they said that they saw they were looking at the trophy list, and there were 2 trophies that somewhat hinted that they may be for the extra levels and that they may be part of DLC, which would piss me off quite a bit if I have to pay for that extra. But nonetheless, if they are included, that would be awesome. I don't know about Crash 2 or 3 if there were any levels like that. I'm assuming after the success of Crash 1, they were given a bit of a better budget and a little bit more leeway in terms of, we need a little bit more time to finish these levels. Sure thing, Naughty Dog, do your thing. So, I do know that there are 2, because the extra warp room at the top of the little castle thingy that you're in Crash 2 is completely full, as is the secret warp room in Crash 3, right? You got your 3 bonus levels in Crash 3 plus your 2 back doors, and the other game is the opposite. You've got 3 back doors and 2 bonus levels. So I didn't look at the gem counts from Crash 2 or 3 if I ever saw the pause menu on either of those games. I think I saw it in Crash 2. So I didn't look at the gem count to see if there were extra gems or not. I suspect there won't be. I'm not aware of any extra levels, but I do know that there are at least 2, again, I'm going to use the term lost levels. And I also know from watching that video from those guys that I'm not really familiar with, that there were at some point, like there were other levels as well that were just kind of like very prototypey. They didn't have any enemies. Most of them didn't have death triggers. So there was one that kind of looked like it was another, not toxic waste. There was another one. I think it was like Cortex Power or something with the acid in the bottom, and like the split path there and everything. I'm pretty sure it looked kind of like that style of level, but it was very small. It was a very short segment. It looked like it was a quick prototype. There was another level that was actually quite interesting. It looked like it was actually a pretty unique level. It didn't look like anything that was already in the game. It was pretty glitchy, but there were like some triggers for stuff. There's like this weird rock thing would fall and would catapult you up a level and stuff like that. And it looks like either they found it too difficult to implement, or they found that because it was going to be the only level of its kind, they didn't want to do that. I'm not too sure. Perhaps it literally just was the last level on the cutting block before they finalized the game. But it looked pretty interesting. So again, I'm curious to see. Obviously, Activision has access to all of this material, so whether they utilized it or not is a whole nother conversation. From what I understand, the trophies suggest that there may be these extra 2 levels. Whether anything else is going to be included is anyone's guess. But much like I said for some of the other stuff with the trophies and with the time trials, anything new that they're adding that isn't just a carbon copy of the originals is always a bonus for us. So I'm hoping that something like that pops up. Other than that, really, Crash 2, my only note here is I'm concerned. This is my one kind of major concern of the music. Crash 1 and Crash 3, I'm not completely like in love with the soundtracks, but Crash 2 I am. So and this is completely a personal thing. I realize a lot of people may very well not care about soundtracks in general, but for me, I'm pretty, like, there's a few soundtracks. I think of the Tiny boss fight, the Engine boss fight, Hang 8's pretty awesome. Actually, I heard the Hang 8. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of the video, and I probably should have said this earlier, but the one concern I had when I kind of started not feeling as pumped about this game coming out was I watched the entire Hang 8 level that they did there, and it didn't quite seem right. The soundtrack was a little bit off, the movement seemed a little bit off, it just didn't seem like what it used to be. But again, once I saw some other footage, I believe they showed Sewer later, and that actually looked really awesome. And then once I saw the Crash 3 stuff, I kind of got resold on the game. So again, it's a lot of nostalgia. I'm fully aware of that, and I'm a pretty big soundtrack person. I'm also fully aware of that, so this may just be me talking. But I'm kind of hoping that, I realize that they're going to redo the soundtrack a bit, but I'm hoping that it's pretty close to the original, and it's not, because for those of you that have played Final Fantasy 12 or Final Fantasy X HD Remaster, there were good points for the remastered soundtrack, and then there were very bad points. There were very, very bad points for a few tracks that just seemed to lose the magical touch of the original. And that's one of the dangerous games you play when you're redoing a soundtrack for a rather popular game. And I think Crash would fall into that category, so that's pretty much my only concern for Crash 2. I talked about the power-ups already and whether Crash Dash would be involved. Crash 3, my only kind of question, comment, concern would actually just be involved with the relics. I'm kind of curious if they're going to keep the same times as they had in the previous levels, if they're going to adjust them slightly, or if they're going to adjust them a great deal. Again, I kind of mentioned it earlier, games seem to be a little more hand-holdy now than they once were. So whether they make at least the sapphires a little bit easier to get, maybe the golds a little bit easier, as long as they keep the platinums that kind of you really need to know what you're doing level, I won't have too much concern with it. Again, right, it's hard to give the exact time for a time trial from Crash 3 to the N.Sane 3, because they will be built ever so slightly differently, the AI will be working ever so slightly differently. So I am kind of curious if that's going to be affected at all, if they're going to be changing stuff with regards to that, if it's going to be completely different, like everything was retimed and these are your new sapphires, your new golds, your new platinums. So yeah, that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about. I'm looking forward to the game, obviously still. I'll be posting it when it comes out. Again, shameless promotion of my own channel. I do have Crash Bandicoot 2 that's going to be getting uploaded right after this. Kind of in preparation of the N.Sane Trilogy, and then once the N.Sane Trilogy comes out, I will be uploading it. I've got a 11 days between the N.Sane Trilogy and Final Fantasy 12 HD Remaster. Oh, excuse me again. I will be finishing the N.Sane Trilogy by then. I may not platinum everything, but if there's at least a trophy for getting gold on everything, kind of how there was an extra gem if you got 104% in the game in Crash 3 there, you got that extra gem and that was your 105% kind of thing. So if there's something similar to that, I'll at least try to go for all the golds. Probably won't get platinums on a ton of stuff, but yeah, I'm pretty excited. So I've got a fair amount of time to do that. I'll be posting at least the first hour, if not the first 2 hours of Crash 1 and Crash 2 by I guess by evening time of the 30th, I should say, because I'll probably be playing them right as it gets released on the pre-order and whatnot. So it's 11 o'clock my time, the day before actually, so I'll have probably 3 or 4 hours at night, and then once I get up I'll probably log a couple more. So I'm Canadian, so I took a Friday off, and I've got Saturday, Sunday off, and Canada Day's on Saturday, so I get a Monday off too, so I'm pretty pumped about that. So I got some time to play. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. I hope you guys check out my my gameplays as we go through. Obviously, I'll be commenting on everything. When we see some new stuff, when we see some changes, obviously I'll be pointing them out as we go. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. And I hope to see you when I officially start recording the N.Sane Trilogy in 2 days. Hope you guys enjoyed this talk. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. My next topic will actually be, I've already mentioned it, but the Final Fantasy 12 HD Remaster. Kind of going to go through some of the similar stuff that I did here, talking about some things I'm looking forward to, some things I'm concerned with. I've got a little bit more of a concern side, so to speak. With this game, I was pretty, whatever I get, I'm pretty pumped with. Like I said at the beginning, I'm already pumped we're getting time trials, so at this point, if they carbon copy everything else, I'm still going to be pretty happy with the game. I've got my time trials, I've got my trophies, people have got their graphics update, not a big thing for me, I know it is for some other people, so we're all going to be pretty happy with this. I don't know if it's going to be the same thing with 12, so that's some stuff we're going to talk about there. And then after that, I'm probably going to talk about Resident Evil 7 after recently beating it, so, and how I'm kind of not envisioning, but at least hoping that the Resident Evil series continues to move forward. But so those are some upcoming topics that I'll be talking about. So if you enjoyed this talk, be sure to tune in for those. This one was a little bit longer than I wanted to. We were also talking about 3 different games, so be that as it may. Hope you enjoyed the footage in the background. I have no idea what I'm doing right now, but I'm sure it was awesome. And with that, I will leave you guys. Again, 2 days from now, be sure to check out my recording of the first 2 games of Crash N.Sane Trilogy. I was going to play them in sequential order, and then I realized I was not going to be able to wait that long for Crash 2, so I'll probably kind of alternate between 1 and 2, and then slowly but surely finish with 3 kind of in its entirety. So that's the game plan for that going forward. Like I said, be sure to tune in. Should be a good time. Hope to see you there.